Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch from Crime Talk, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already done so, we would ask that you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell so that you receive notifications of when we go live or put up new content, and as always, leave us a comment. Some of our best suggestions on news to cover comes from our subscribers. First on the docket, Chad Daybell had his first court appearance. Analysis and observations here. For those of you who do not know, Chad Daybell is married to Lori Vallow. They got married 2 weeks after Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, passed away. They jump off to the islands in Hawaii and don't bother telling anyone or complying with any court orders regarding the whereabouts of Lori Vallow's children, JJ and Ty Lee. Ultimately, Lori Vallow gets brought back to Idaho. Her bond was set at $5 million. It was then reduced to $1 million cash, property, or surety. She remains in custody, actually has a preliminary hearing coming up shortly. Well, yesterday, a lot of breaking news. Chad Daybell's property, which has previously been searched back in January of 2020, gets searched again. And in this particular time, the police move to specific locations and start digging. It was almost as if they knew where to look for what has now been confirmed human remains of children. And the grandmother of JJ has confirmed to news media sources that she has been informed that the remains, or at least one of the remains, is that of JJ. So now Chad Daybell gets arrested last night. He appears in court today. He has 2 charges pending in a criminal complaint. And those charges are destruction, alteration, or concealment of evidence. This is a felony in the state of Idaho, and it carries up to 5 years in prison and a maximum fine of $10,000. Now, there are 2 counts, presumably one for each child, and the dates include on count 1, September 22nd and September 8th, both dates in which JJ and Ty Lee were last seen. Now, certainly, Mr. Vallow may have some explaining to do as to how human remains arrived on his property. Now, obviously, the burden is always on the government to prove how they got there, and they also have to prove that Chad Daybell had something to do with that, either personally or whether he aided or abetted. And so the elements of both charges state that Chad Daybell willfully destroyed, altered, and or concealed human remains and or did aid and abet another alter and or conceal human remains, knowing that said human remains were about to be produced, used, and or discovered as evidence in a felony proceeding, inquiry and or investigation authorized by law with the intent to prevent it from being produced, used, and or discovered. Basically, delaying or hindering the process of justice that was going to take place. The burden's always on the government to do that, but clearly someone would want to know how and when those bodies got there. Now, we talked about this last night when we went live last evening. Mr. Means, who represents Lori Vallow, stated on the record at the bond reduction hearing that he was the attorney for both Ms. Vallow as well as Mr. Chad Daybell. Coincidentally, Chad Daybell had new counsel with him this morning. What could that possibly mean? Well, we told you that I was of the mindset that since he said he represented both individuals, he could not represent either one of them. Well, he's now obtained new counsel. It gets a little trickier. The question then becomes, man, it sure seems like those police knew exactly where to go when they executed that search warrant. So one could possibly think that perhaps Lori Vallow has turned on Chad Daybell. Now you think, oh, that's not possible, Scott, right? They're in love. They are in this together. This bond that they had that they've described as meeting their soulmates. I have seen people roll on each other in cases less serious than a homicide investigation simply to save themselves. Usually, it's the person on the inside feels as though they're not being taken care of appropriately by the people on the outside, i.e., not getting them attorney, not putting money on their books, thinking I'm going to go to the person on the inside is thinking that they're going to go to prison and the person on the outside isn't going to get any punishment at all. Now, we don't know that for sure, but I have a hunch. And you say, why do you have a hunch, Scott? And we don't like to speculate on hunches. That's why we have the motion as well as the order appointing a special prosecutor on this case. And the amended motion to appoint a special prosecuting attorney was filed in this particular case. The motion states, comes now the Fremont County prosecuting attorney and pursuant to the Idaho Code hereby moves this court for its order appointing a special prosecuting attorney to investigate and, if necessary, prosecute the above-mentioned matter and any other matters arising out of this case. The motion further states, the cause for this motion is that there exists a close nexus with the Madison County, Idaho, with their pending charges and future charges. The motion states, I have contacted Robert H. Wood, prosecutor for Madison County, Idaho, and he has indicated he would be willing as a special prosecuting attorney in connection with this matter. And that motion was filed by Marcia Murdoch, the prosecuting attorney. The order then states that the special prosecutor is hereby appointed. They'll not receive any particular rate for the prosecution fees in this particular case because, well, that's their job. But even more interesting is that there is a motion to seal the affidavit in this particular case. You say, why would anybody want to seal the affidavit? And you find that usually the prosecutor or sometimes the defense doesn't want an affidavit released to the public. We saw that in Letitia Stauch's case, and it was leaked, and then they ultimately gave it out to the public. Here it states in their motion to seal that there is an ongoing criminal investigation and that releasing the affidavit could jeopardize the safety of the officers and/or individuals who are still currently investigating on scene and continuing to search for and collect physical evidence. They state that obviously that there has been significant media attention on this particular case and that sealing the documents during the pendency of this criminal investigation is in the best interest of justice and will preserve the right to a fair trial. Well, what that means is there's obviously someone providing information, there's an ongoing investigation, and it sounds as though additional charges are forthcoming, but they don't want to reveal that unless and until new charges are actually brought. So we'll get an affidavit shortly, but we just don't have it quite yet. And the court granted that motion to seal today. So now the bond for Chad Daybell has now been set for $1 million. The attorney for Chad Daybell argued that the bond should be significantly lower. In fact, he asked for a bond at $50,000 for each charge. His argument was that, one, the charge is not that serious because it only carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in the Idaho state prison system. In the big picture, that is not a very serious charge. Now, there's 2 charges. Those could be served consecutively if he were convicted, although we'll give everyone the presumption of innocence. And so he could face up to a 10-year sentence. Mr. Chad Daybell's attorney also argued that, hey, he's not going anywhere. He's got family ties to the community. His house is here. He'll comply with anything that the court asks him to do. Pretty standard argument for a bond reduction hearing. The district attorney countered by saying these are serious charges, and hint, hint, wink, wink, judge, we believe this is a beginning of a much more serious investigation and/or charges. The prosecutor did reveal that the remains were that of children, and so one can reasonably conclude that obviously this is a homicide investigation, no doubt. The prosecutor also noted to the court that when there were valid orders for Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to return back to the state of Idaho to answer questions as to the whereabouts of the children presumably found on the property of Mr. Chad Daybell, they did not return. The court granted the prosecutor's request, set bond at $1 million, and if Mr. Chad Daybell does in fact make bond, he can only stay within a 4-county jurisdiction of eastern Idaho. He has to have a GPS and basically comply with any other conditions set up by pretrial supervision. Seems very unlikely that Mr. Chad Daybell will make bond, since he did not make bond for his wife, Lori Vallow, who had the same bond at $1 million. We've mentioned this before. Most bail bondsmen will bond out anybody as long as they can get their fee, usually 10% of the bond, and that they have sufficient collateral. So if the bond's $1 million, the bonds person would want $1 million in collateral so that they could easily pay the court if the defendant absconded and they were unable to find them. A preliminary hearing was set in the matter for Chad Daybell for July 1 and 2. We'll be watching. We hope you will be as well. Next on the docket, the Ahmaud Arbery case. And the attorney for William Roddy Bryan is upset, and he is not going to take it anymore. In fact, he is going to war. For those of you who do not recall, Ahmaud Arbery was a young black man who was in a neighborhood down in Brunswick, Georgia, and the McMichaels, a father-son team, basically had information, or they thought they had some information, that Mr. Ahmaud Arbery was stealing something or coming out of a property. It's been determined that Mr. Arbery stole nothing, and basically the McMichaels chased him around the neighborhood with the assistance of Mr. William Roddy Bryan. In fact, it was Mr. Bryan's video had been given to an attorney, and the attorney released it to the media thinking that it would somehow help clear this whole mess up. Well, all it did was got everybody charged in this particular case. The McMichaels are charged with first-degree murder, as well as Mr. Bryan for his aiding and abetting, basically in a felony murder. Mr. Bryan doesn't think he should be there. In fact, he and his attorney believe that he should simply be a witness. That's what he stated before he was arrested when he gave interviews, and now his attorney is stating that, trying to get him out of jail. The attorney for Mr. Bryan has filed several motions demanding a speedy trial, which obviously everyone is entitled to a speedy trial. We don't throw people in jail and simply tell them to wait. Well, unless, of course, there's a pandemic going on. The courts have been okay with doing that. He also basically wants a gag order on Ahmaud Arbery's family and any of their representatives, basically claiming that they are tainting the public opinion of this particular case, and it's prejudicial and inflammatory to the case and preventing Mr. Bryan from receiving a fair trial. Mr. Bryan's attorney filed a motion stating that his client should be treated as a cooperating witness and not a defendant. We're totally beyond that realm of possibilities at this point, unless there's a deal cut and he's going to testify. But since he thinks or says that he's done nothing wrong, it's a little unlikely that he would be of any value to the prosecuting attorney. Mr. Bryan's attorney has also filed motions stating that the appointment of the attorney general, basically as a special prosecutor, is insufficient and illegal. We'll see how that all comes out for Mr. Bryan, but I don't expect a whole lot of relief being granted to him in this particular process. Now, as it relates to information that Mr. Bryan says is being withheld from him, obviously the prosecutor should turn anything that they have over to Mr. Bryan and his attorneys, even if it's exculpatory. Why? Because that's required under the law. Supreme Court case, Brady v. Maryland, prosecutor always has to turn over exculpatory information. Next on the docket, a George Floyd update. Obviously, everyone has heard about the George Floyd matter. 4 Minneapolis police officers have been charged with his murder. And there's some new information coming out about the fact that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin actually worked with each other. And that story had been out there for a while. But now there is a report that a coworker, a gentleman by the name of David Pinney, has told CBS News that these two men, not only do they know each other, they actually butted heads with each other. Particularly, Mr. Floyd was upset and thought that Derek Chauvin was extremely aggressive with some of the patrons at the bar in which they worked. Now, As we understand it, Mr. Floyd worked there as a private security guard for this establishment where they both worked, and Derek Chauvin worked as a off-duty police officer, which is not uncommon for police officers to work basically a side gig as security officers to make extra money. Why does this become relevant? Well, think about it. If Mr. Chauvin, because he's now a Mr., he's no longer a police officer, had a beef with George Floyd, and now he basically has an opportunity to inflict a little pain and think, oh, you think I was a little tough on the patrons? I'll show you. Certainly, possibly becomes relevant. I'm sure the Attorney General has sent investigators out to speak to Mr. Pinney, and we'll see what effect that may have on trial or their potential testimony as well. We have a new sponsor, and it is the people from the TC1200 Pro Tactical Flashlight. And I'm telling you, this is a must, all right? Whether it's for you so that you can personally carry it with you, throw it in the car, throw it in your purse, throw it in the boat, the RV, or whether you're going to give it as a gift. Father's Day is coming. What do guys like? That's right, gadgets. Well, this is the perfect gadget. This light is super bright. I'm telling you, the other day we had a huge windstorm. Our power was out. Guess what we did? First thing we want to do, went straight for our Tactical Pro flashlight. Additionally, I was out flying Crime Talk 1 a couple of weeks ago. Had an issue over the state of Wyoming in the dark. My first thought was, am I going to have to put Crime Talk 1 down out here in the middle of nowhere? Well, at least I have my tactical flashlight. And what's good about my tactical flashlight is, if you have an emergency, you can flash it. People can see that you are in need of help. Go to crimetalk1.com, TAC1. We have a link right here. Go there, order a flashlight, put one in your house, in your motorhome, your RV. Do what you need to do to have it. Whether it's a gift or for your own personal use, you won't regret having it when you need it. Next on the docket, our dumb criminal contestant of the day. We may actually have to start a dumb attorney criminal of the day event because we've had a lot of attorneys getting into trouble lately. Well, there is an attorney in Minneapolis. She's 64 and her name is Stephanie Rapkin. And it is alleged that within a 24-hour span, she was arrested twice. Once for spitting in the face of a young protester at a rally on Saturday, and then pushing a protester and kneeing the arresting officer on Sunday. Clearly, Ms. Rapkin, as an attorney, just doesn't get it. Maybe time to retire. Now, she was given the presumption of innocence, but an attorney should realize more than anyone that they take an oath to defend and support the Constitution. And what's the First Amendment to the Constitution? That's right. The right for protest, to petition your government, peaceful assembly. If someone is protesting peacefully, don't bother them. Even if they're protesting illegally, they're burning something, call the police. But you don't need to go and confront and spit on anyone. That's just wrong, and that has made Stephanie Rapkin our dumb criminal contestant of the day. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you taking your time to watch Crime Talk. We hope that you enjoy it. We try to give you information that you're not going to get on any other channel because we actually practice law. We want to thank all of our Patreon members who have decided to support us. Additionally, if you would like any of the Crime Talk gear that we get, you can hit the link below. It takes you straight to Teespring. They'll mail it to you within a week. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.